Hello and thanks for joining us. Now, it's been a tough 12 months for the cultural sector. All this week, we're looking at the impact of COVID on an industry that relies on human contact and interaction in concerts, exhibitions, movie theatres and festivals.
Anything you want, anything, just don't tell me no, you stop it still. Then you make it.
In today's show, we're speaking to a singer-songwriter who, despite all the challenges of last year, is one of the breakout artists of 2020. She's been nominated for a Golden Globe Award and her first album is just out.
You'll never stop this thing. I will never let you go. Well, who am I to say? Maybe by now you should know.
Celeste, hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's been a bit of a crazy year, well, for everybody, but for you as well. And this time last year, you'd just done your now legendary performance at the Brit Awards of your track Strange. You were on Forbes magazine's 30 Under 30 list. You were anointed as one to watch in 2020, but then everything shut down and there were no concerts for people to go and watch. What has this time been like for you?
Well, I've really had to learn to adapt during this time, and it's definitely been like quite complicated sort of understanding how to do that and the way to sort of like maintain fulfillment in the day-to-day when like a lot of the perks have kind of been stripped of it. Especially I really love playing shows and I really miss playing shows, and being in the studio as well, it's kind of like a grey area as to like what we can do in the studio and how many people we are able to have in the studio. So as you can see, I've got my piano at home, so I can kind of like do a little bit here, which has been really helpful.
Isn't it strange how people can change from strangers to friends, friends into lovers, and strangers again.
And we've got people watching from all over the world. Many will have heard your music on the radio, but perhaps don't know much about you. Tell us a bit about your journey. You're born in LA, you grew up in Brighton in the UK. Did you always sing? How did you find music?
I really started to take singing seriously when I was like about 17, 18. It was just really at that point that I started to like write as many songs as I could and experiment with my voice and try to listen and learn from other singers. And definitely one of those people is Nina Simone. She's my favorite singer of all time. And there's so much to learn in what she has sort of left behind, and not just in like her phrasing and her lyrical ability and her tone and her melodies. The other thing that I sort of seem to find like so enriching in her is just like learning how like from sticking to and only speaking for what she believed in, how that has sort of like stood the test of time.
Isn't it strange
And it was at the start of last year that your career really started to take off. You won BBC Music Sound of 2020 and the Brits Rising Star Award. And your first tour was supposed to be last April. COVID obviously ended all live touring. You performed this your track Strange at the Brits in February. Did you do any gigs after that? Was that the last one that you did?
That was the last show that I did. Yeah, I think the day after I went to Italy to go to a show and a fashion show, and then I came home, and immediately after that we were kind of in a lockdown, and so I kind of just packed my dress and put it under my bed and was like, oh, I'll leave that behind. And I sort of felt like I was like putting a wedding dress under the bed after a divorce or something.
Did you feel worried then about your career and what was going to happen at that point?
I'd worked quite continuously for about 2.5 years to get to that point of doing shows every day and being in the studio in between. And so initially when I thought it might only last for like a really short space of time, I definitely just felt a sense of like, oh, I get to settle for a moment.
And when the pandemic started, you did some virtual performances to raise money for people affected by COVID and encourage people to social distance. How important do you think music has been in these past 12 months to help people get through these times when we're all cut off from each other?
For me, like sort of like art in general has been like such a savior, whether it be sort of like delving more into like a fashion archive and sort of visual like exploration and reading and painting is like been so important for me. It's like sort of been my place to go to. And so I've noticed in the last year that people have seemed to look for a bit more of a real sort of like purposed version of like whatever sort of form that comes in, and music is definitely one of those things that can do that.
What's like your number one album that you've been listening to recently?
Music that I had the most time with was probably Al Green and Bill Withers, and there was a Bill Withers album that I went back to called Just As I Am, which has one of my favourite songs on it called In My Heart. So like I'd been listening to that a lot. I discovered a singer called Betty Swan, and I'd listened to an album of hers that's a self-titled album, but it has a song called Then You Can Tell Me Goodbye, which was a song that just really captured me when I first heard it.
And what songs did you write during lockdown?
One of the songs I wrote that did end up on my album is a song called Tonight Tonight, and that was kind of a song about like being in the early days of sort of like my relationship, and my reference point for that was a song called Teachers by Leonard Cohen, and to me it seemed like it was a song about like lovers learning from each other about love and evolving within it, and even if like sort of they don't travel together for forever, they sort of learn something from that interaction which travels with them forever.
Myself, although it's nervous and unsure, looking for your shadow in the light beneath the door, and I want you all so badly.
It has ended up being quite a remarkable 12 months for you. You finished your album, Not Your Muse. You contributed to soundtracks for 2 movies, Pixar's Soul and Netflix, The Trial of the Chicago 7, which has got you a Golden Globe nomination for Hear My Voice. Congratulations.
Hear my voice, hear my dream.
Did all that change the way you thought about your music career? Have you rethought things, doing things without being on the road and being at home?
Being at home and not traveling is really, really valuable for being able to write and just being in that space and allowing yourself to nurture your ideas in that way. But going out and being able to perform your songs in person, there isn't really like another feeling like that, and you learn so much in that, and it's sort of like practice. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to go out on like a proper sort of world tour in 2022. I don't really want to do any more virtual shows or anything.
In the meantime, though, you've got the Golden Globes coming up. You've been nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Original Song alongside her and Andra Day, 3 women of colour named by an industry that's been criticised for many years for its lack of diversity and inclusion. Do you think there's a shift going on now for artists of colour?
I think there's definitely been a shift in people's kind of proactiveness in trying to create more opportunities for people of colour and sort of implementing diversity into their workforce. Sometimes it feels sincere and sometimes it feels awkward. I think that like whichever it is, it's still worthy and they're still worthy of it and still deserving of that recognition. So there's definitely been a change. I find that like something that I'm really passionate about is like sort of creating opportunities, not only for people of colour, but for people that are sort of in a position where their sort of like social and economic sort of standpoint affects their trajectory and not the potential that they have within themselves, but like the potential within society to be able to like sort of exist outside of the place that they began. And so I'm really sort of interested in the future and sort of like giving myself and helping to sort of create that inclusion and further opportunities.
And Celeste, what do the next few months look like for you?
I'm gonna work on my second album, and then I'm going to just try and play some shows. I really hope that I get to travel. But as well, with everything that's happened with Brexit in the UK, it's really uncertain for people that are here now in the UK and wanting to go and work in Europe, what we're actually going to be able to do and what the effects of that are going to be. We're still really unsure. So we're kind of having to hold off on planning anything until it's a bit clearer.
Love is bad. Love is bad. Love is bad.
Celeste, it's been a real pleasure to chat to you. We always end with our guests' cultural pick of the moment. What have you chosen for us?
This is one of my good friends, and his name is Hack Baker. He's one of my favourite sort of artists to come out of the UK at the moment. I think something that sort of makes him so untouchable is that he always remains very in touch with like the truth of everything, and he doesn't do anything for any other reason, and that's the reason why I have sort of like the most admiration for him. And this is a song which is one of my favourites, and it's called Wobbles on the Cobbles.
Okay, Celeste, thank you so much for joining us. Your new album is called Not Your Muse. It's out now. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Looking back, his last weeks have hardly been a parade, though. If only you knew how much we loved him.
Been another tough old week on the old cobbles. Whole weeks for the peaks, troughs and wobbles. Tell you what, there'll be £1 million steep through these old goggles. They'll pay millions to watch us struggle again and again.
So I guess we'll just get on with our own shit, man. Can't help but take these risks.